Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Our Hearts at Home podcast, where we talk about trusting God in the midst of suffering. We're your hosts, Gary and Laura House, co-founders of the Our Hearts at Home ministry to bereaved parents.
Every one of us encounters suffering. Each week on this show, we sit down with people who have a deep understanding of suffering because they've experienced it. We hope you'll leave here with new insights into how you can trust the Lord through the painful times of your life.
So thanks for joining us. We think you're going to be encouraged by what you hear today. On today's podcast, we are sharing the first of a two-part discussion about navigating suicide loss that was presented on a recent webinar. All of the parents on the panel have lost a child by suicide.
We started the webinar by sharing about a soon-to-be-released book, Held Through the Storm, Stories of Suicide Loss and Hope in Christ, which includes 14 parents sharing their experiences. On the webinar you're about to hear, 10 of those authors made up the panel.
If you are listening today and have not lost someone to suicide, we hope this broadcast will help equip you to reach out to those who are hurting. Our society has so many incorrect stigmas and misunderstandings about suicide, and we hope that this podcast will be helpful in understanding this type of loss.
And if you're a parent who has lost someone by suicide, we hope this two-part podcast will be comforting and encouraging and will bring hope. While the presenters are all parents who have experienced suicide loss, we aren't counselors. These thoughts today are from our own experiences. So thanks for being here and listening. We think you're going to be encouraged.
We'd like to welcome everyone to tonight's webinar. Our topic is navigating suicide loss. And we have a panel of several parents who have joined us who have all lost children by suicide. We hope to address some of the unique issues that we face and perhaps answer some of the questions that we deal with when we walk this grief journey.
So to get started tonight, I wanted to share something that we're excited about, particularly everyone presenting tonight. And it is a new book that is coming out August 15th called Held Through the Storm, Stories of Suicide Loss and Hope in Christ. And all 10 of the parents' families that are represented here tonight have written chapters in this book and share their children and share their story. And we're excited about this because if you're someone who has lost a child by suicide, I think that you will find great comfort and encouragement. I know I wish that we had had something at the beginning of our journey where we could see so many other people who had walked this road. We didn't know anyone who had been touched by suicide. So we're excited from that end. We're also excited for people who have not lost anyone by suicide, but might have preconceived ideas about suicide loss. And also they don't know how to help a friend. They don't know how to help someone in their grief. And so we're excited about the book from that as well. So you can look for that August 15th. But as you get to know the parents that are presenting tonight, you can know that their full stories are shared in the upcoming book.
Well, let's get started tonight by introducing ourselves and our kids. Maybe we can just go around everyone who is presenting tonight and share a little bit. Give us your name, tell us where you live, your child's name, maybe their age. And if you have a picture, we'd love to see what they look like. So why don't we just, well, Laura, why don't you go ahead and start?
Okay,
You're right
I'll
up in the top corner there.
Okay, so this is our Nathan, and he went to heaven in 2016 at the age of 25, and we live in Virginia. Let's go across the top. Top first, you want to go next?
We are Howard and Joy Tucker. This is our son, Stephen. He left us January 9th, 2017 at the age of 36. He is our only son. We live in Bryant, Arkansas.
So my name is Nancy Manos, and my husband James and I live in Gilbert, Arizona. This is our daughter, Alex. She died in 2017. She was 23 years old.
Hi, my name is Jim Beardsley. I currently reside in Greensboro, North Carolina. My daughter is Caitlin, and she passed away in 2020. And see, I'm going to see if I can show you this. So this is, she put together 16 pictures of us running. Oh, well, you can maybe get her like in one of these, but yeah, it doesn't really come across. But she and I ran a lot together, so she made a little collage of her and me after our runs.
That's neat. Wathen, do you want to go next?
Sure. We're Bob and Susan Wathen, and we live in Hannibal, Missouri. And our daughter, Hannah, was 18 on May 19th of 2015 when she ran ahead of us very unexpectedly.
Hi, I'm Chrissy Slate. I live in Tennessee, and this is my son, Caleb. He was 17 when he went to heaven on August 12th, 2019. Again, very unexpectedly.
We are Russ and Nancy Sullivan. We live in Durham, Ontario, Canada. And this is our precious daughter, Amberly Rose. And she went home to be with the Lord on September 11th, 2020.
We are Josh and Nicole Kingsbury. This is our daughter, Amber. And we live in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. And she ran ahead April 25th, 2021 at the age of 14.
We are Melissa and Todd Schaefer. We're Americans living abroad near Montreal. This is our son, Tristan. And he went to heaven 2 days before his 19th birthday in 2020.
All right, and I am Lisa Thacker. I live near Kansas City, Missouri. This is our son. I'm always bad about the picture here. I had to do it on my phone. I'm turning it the wrong way. I'm still doing it the wrong. Can you see that? There we go. Okay. And Dalton was 15, and he went to heaven on May 14th of 2020.
Okay.
All right. Is that everybody? I think
Yep.
we covered everyone. Good. Thank you very much. Well, the first topic that we want to discuss tonight has to do with stigmas and misconceptions. I don't know about the rest of you, but I know before we lost Nathan to suicide, I had a lot of both. I didn't understand suicide or why someone would take their life. And I remember specifically thinking that if someone took their life, they probably were selfish or they weren't very close to their family or didn't have any friends. And the list goes on and on. But as we got to know people who had lost children this way, we realized that most of those stigmas and misconceptions were simply false. And so we wanted to take a few minutes tonight to talk about our children who passed away by suicide and some of the stigmas and misconceptions that you may have experienced as well. So anyone who would like to start, let's just take a few moments and talk about our kids in these areas.
None of us want to jump in. I'll say something. We probably need a leader to tell us who to speak next. We were told that too. We had several people say, oh, she was so selfish to have made that decision. But the truth was, anyone who said that about our daughter didn't know her personally. She was one of the most generous, kind-hearted people who love deeply. I think everybody I've talked to has had that experience where their kids loved deeply. Alex would find the lonely person and befriend them. And that was more my experience.
We would echo that about Hannah. And it's funny you mentioned just so often when we're facilitating retreats, parents will describe their children who made the decision to take their life by suicide as the ones that would kind of catch those others that are on the fringe. They would notice others and be able to pull them in. And that's exactly what Hannah did. We're a tight-knit family, just like so many of you out there. And so, Gary mentioned that stigma. That's not the case. So, but yeah, fun loving, fun sense of humor.
You know, and I would say this, we had an opportunity about 2 years after Hannah went to heaven to speak to a school. But somebody that I used to go to high school with was a teacher at this school. So we went and did a presentation, and we did about a 45-minute presentation on suicide and just how it affected us and our family. And then we finished and left, and we encouraged any students who needed to talk to somebody to seek out a counselor. And a couple of days after the event, my friend reached out to me, and they had a young man who stayed after and talked to the counselor, and they wound up taking him to get help immediately. And he had a plan. He was just waiting for his parents to be gone. And about a year after that, we had an opportunity to spend the afternoon with that young man and his mom and my friend. They came to visit us in Hannibal. And after spending the afternoon together, I asked him the question. I said, out of all of the things we said, what impacted you the most that caused you to get the help that you need? And he said, seeing how hard it was on your family and the things that you went through. So that spoke to me that he wasn't being selfish. He couldn't see anything other than what was in front of him. And those kinds of things weren't even crossing his mind.
Yeah.
Wow.
I think I could echo a lot of that for Caitlin. She was very other-centered. I mean, there were 4 people that were on the road to suicide themselves, and she made sure they got the help they needed, you know. And her class, she was in a nurse anesthetist program, and she was 26 when she passed away. But her faculty said, you know, out of the whole class, she was the least one that they thought would ever, you know, take her own life, because she was so joyful and helped everybody else and thought of them. In fact, there's one gal that Caitlin mentored, and on the anniversary of Caitlin's death, this girl sends out this text to anybody that wants a Starbucks coffee, I will buy it for you. Because Caitlin was such a giver to me. I want to be a giver to other people.
So, beautiful.
I will say, in reading the chapters of the book, every one of these 14 kids loved their family. Were very, very close families, all of us. Every one of them was very kind, tender-hearted, loving. It's just amazing. And so I'm anxious for a lot of people to read about the kids, because it will definitely dispel any of those societal misconceptions that people have, because they simply aren't true. So,
anyone else?
I would add that one thing that I come across a lot are people who think that there are signs to be seen for somebody getting ready to commit suicide. And certainly there's obvious signs, like making a plan and having a weapon and all that. But I've talked to a lot of people where they say, well, we'll watch, they tell me the story, and then they'll say, well, we'll watch for the signs. And like, what signs are you looking for? The signs are already there. You know, it's, and everybody sees it. And people come up to me sometimes and says, you know, I mean, what signs did you miss? And they don't mean it meanly. They just mean it because they want to know what I'm like, you know, we knew exactly what was going on. Tristan had already told us that he had tried 8 times. And before then, we didn't know a thing. And after that, we knew everything, and none of it helped. So,
I would fully echo that. I think if your child or loved one is breathing and has emotions, there's a sign. It's just it's not to scare us, it's to prepare us to be ready and to be alert that it can happen. So.
But you can't see inside someone's brain, as we've all said before. Right. And, you know, for a lot of parents, it's not that they weren't looking, but you can't see what's inside someone else's brain. And yeah, it's an incredible thing. That kind of leads us into the next question. We were going to talk a little bit about guilt and regret, and someone that's here this evening sent this question in. or she wrote this. She said, "I'm having a hard time accepting she's no longer with us. I'll never see her again or talk to her again. I have an incredible amount of guilt over the arguments that we had." What would some of you have to say about guilt and regret?
I'll go ahead and share about that. The guilt was extremely heavy for me, as I was the last person to see and talk to Caleb before he died. And we had a little bit, I wouldn't call it an argument, but he did get, if you want to say, in trouble, for something very minor, actually. An important issue, but minor. And so, I had told him he couldn't go out to his plans that he had for the night because he was to stay home, and assumed that, we would continue the conversation later that evening. And that didn't happen. And so I blamed myself. And it was my fault. It was me. I led him to do it. I caused it. And those feelings stuck around for a very long time. But of course, through the help with counselors and pastors and friends and books and prayer and journaling, I came to the understanding that it wasn't my fault. I did not cause Caleb to do what he did. I fully believe Caleb didn't even really know what he was doing. That if I had, answers to why he did what he did, it wouldn't change anything. He still would be gone. He still would be in heaven, and not here with me. So I really had to lay down that blame and forgive myself. I only knew what I knew at the time, which was nothing. And I had deemed myself the mom who walked away because, I said, I have to go. I love you, but I have to go. And I turned to leave, and it was like I couldn't take another step. And I just felt like God was telling me, tell him you love him. Don't leave until you tell him you love him. And so I turned around and I said, I love you. And then I left. I was the mom who walked away. I left my son, and I left, and he died. So those feelings are very natural, to feel blame and guilt and all of those things. So it's a very natural to process to go through as a parent. But I would just say to process those feelings in a healthy way, by seeking out, therapy and, doing healthy coping skills to work through those, because ultimately it is not our fault. So that's just my personal experience. And I know how very painful and frustrating that is when you have all of these questions and you think that it's your fault and that you caused your child to do what they did. Mm-hmm. You can't go back and fix anything because they're not here.
Mm-hmm. Our daughter struggled a lot with her health, and so we grieved for many, many years because she was in so much pain. And we did everything we could. But I remember when she left, I still just kept telling the Lord I couldn't keep her here. Mm. And the Lord just so faithfully reminded me that our children's last breath doesn't belong to us, that there's nothing we can do to keep them here. But he's the one who created them, and he's the one who numbers their days. And that brought me a great amount of comfort, knowing that God had allotted Amberly 24 years on this earth, and nothing I could do would change that, whether it was that she took her own life or that she would have been in a car accident. But this was the time that God had allotted for her.
Mm-hmm. Anybody else? We had a similar experience when our son died. He texted me 3 hours before he took his life. And his mental illness was so severe at that point that I knew my answer to him would anger him. So I chose not to answer the text. And 3 hours later, he was gone. And he was mad at his girlfriend and for not getting dog food. And so that was the reason. And so I would have I would have said, give her some grace. And I just chose not to answer him because he was so unstable and having no idea that when she went out to get dog food, that he would be gone.
We dealt with many years of Stephen had substance abuse, alcoholic, drugs. He battled that as well as physical. He had a stomach issue that we never really did find a solution for, and he was in constant pain. So there was a lot of factors. We look now and realize so much that he was suffering with, and we did know the condition, but we didn't know exactly how to address it. He had attempted before several times, and I remember one of the times that he was in rehab, and we talked about suicide, and no, Dad, I'll never do that. That was just even in my mind. It could have been just a moment that things escalated, and we've lived with that regret, the failure that we have felt. What should we have done? What to prevent it?
But we couldn't have done anything. We did all we could, and like I believe it was Nancy that said, the Lord knows, the Lord has them.
He has,
and we don't have control over that. So.
Todd, you were going to say something.
Yeah, I've struggled with this a lot too, and I have to remind myself to zoom back and realize that every parent has moments where they've done something to their child and they've regretted it, but it hasn't ended in suicide. And it's just normal part of life that we screw up. We say things we shouldn't have said. We do things we shouldn't have said, or we don't do things we should have done. And there's no way to know that when someone's ready to take their life. That's just such a strange thing that is not on our radar. And we can't beat ourselves up for something that is so horrific that you don't even think about it. So, I think we got to give ourselves a lot of grace as parents when we're dealing with, the suicide of our children, because nobody expects it. And in reality, Tristan, we had him he tried 8 times. We had no clue that there was anything wrong. And then we had 2 weeks where he was getting help, and, we knew he was struggling with suicide, but he was on the upward rise, so it seemed like he was pulling out of it, and then he decided no.
I want to clarify something that may also help you guys out. When we say he tried 8 times, we didn't know. He told us, I've tried 8 times in the past 2 weeks. And I was present immediately after. He walked in from the garage at 3 a.m, and there was nothing unusual except for the fact that he was walking in from the garage at 3 a.m. He didn't look different. He didn't act different. He didn't talk different. And he had just come in from trying to die from carbon monoxide poisoning. I think you could tell by the way they looked, or I should have known, or I wasn't paying close attention enough, or it's my fault because I didn't see. That's a perfect example of how there's no way you could have known. And you would have acted totally different if you had known. We all would have.
Yeah. I'm glad you just said that. Somebody asked me when I was struggling with all of this, if you had known what to do, would you have done it? Well, of course. And that's what you just said. And all of us, if any of us had known something more that we should have done, we would have instantly done it. Lisa, you started to say something.
I was going to just say that I think we have to think about where guilt and regret comes from. Is that coming from God, or does the enemy put that in us? You know, if there was something as a parent we were doing wrong, that would be a conviction versus, you know, guilt and regret. And I heard somewhere or read somewhere that guilt and regret is holding our then self accountable for what we know now. You know, we didn't know what we know now. I mean, if I knew now, then what I know now, I certainly wouldn't have done what I did. But, you know, I would have done more, but we didn't know that then. And so that's what guilt and regret are, holding us accountable in the opposite retroactive way. So
it's a really good one. Somebody had put in the chat box here. She says, someone says, I feel guilty after being around people whose children didn't die by suicide. I feel like they think my child chose to die when theirs wanted to live. But that's not the case. Our kids didn't want to die. They could no longer, for whatever, we all have different stories, but live with the pain, cope with the situation. And they felt that hopelessness, that this was their only thing they could do. It's not that they didn't want to be here. So, yeah. Anybody else have something to say? Because there's so many people making comments here about guilt and regret. Nancy.
I just wanted to share one thing that really helped me. I think I dug in when Alex died, and I was like, the enemy has stolen enough. He doesn't get my peace. He doesn't get my joy. And I know myself, like I will end up in a pit of despair if I allow myself to do the what ifs and the, you know, if onlys, if only we had done, if only we had known. It doesn't lead to anything fruitful. And so I just learned quickly, just take it to the Lord. And I refused to let myself go down those trails when the enemy would like peck at me. I felt like he was like, oh, what if you had? And I can't undo it. I can't change the path we're on. So I choose peace in this moment. I choose to rest in the Lord. It was horrible and painful. I'm not saying it was all sunshine and rainbows, but I just couldn't do the what ifs and the if onlys because they would kill me.
Two things for me. One is a professional counselor really helped me struggle with the guilt that's there. And I mean, every parent alive has guilt if their kid died by suicide. I mean, it just goes with the territory. The other thing, you know, reading some of the comments, part of the horror of this experience is that people will not understand. They won't. They think all sorts of wrong things. And I think we can try to educate them. I do it. I've spoken at national conferences, but you know what? A lot of them won't. They just won't. And if you make it your goal to help everyone understand perfectly, I think you might be frustrated. So I've just had to accept that part of the pain of this whole experience is not being understood by a lot of people around.
That's good.
And I think one other thing that I've dealt with is that when our children are young, it's easy to fix their problems. And that's what parents do, right? Is we fix our kids' problems. But as we all know, whether it's a suicide issue or not, as they become teenagers and young adults, we have to let go more and they have to take more responsibility. And as hard as we try, it's difficult oftentimes as the kids get older to fix their problems. And so what we're experiencing is very difficult in itself, but also goes along with just the natural course of our kids growing up, where we just can't fix everything for them like we did when they were younger, and particularly when it's a mental illness and something that they don't understand themselves. And obviously they couldn't fix what they were dealing with themselves. And I really believe that most of our children tried very, very hard to figure out what they were struggling with, trying to search for answers and solutions, and probably didn't even know how to articulate to us as parents or friends or anyone what they were trying to navigate. Well, let's take another topic here, and that has to do with trauma and PTSD.
I could share about that as well. I could talk for a long time about that actually, but I won't. I'll just share a little bit. I still struggle with PTSD. I likely will for the rest of my life, because what we experienced was extremely tragic, extremely unexpected, and kind of like, I relate it to a natural disaster that kind of comes in very quickly. The community I live experienced a tornado in December that came, wasn't expected to be as bad as it was, and it devastated our community and lives were lost. And so I kind of relate what I went through to a tornado came in and ripped everything apart and then just left the pieces laying there all over the place. And it's up to us to kind of pick up those pieces and try to put life back together again. And some of those community members are trying to rebuild their homes from that disaster. And I'm still trying to rebuild my life as well. So it doesn't happen overnight. It's a process, and it's a painful process. But processing your PTSD and your trauma is extremely important. I am not one of the people to, shove it down, brush it under a rug, sweep it under a rug, hide it away, not think about it. I feel like I'm constantly thinking about it and constantly processing. EMDR did not work for me. I did not like the experience of EMDR. But one thing that did work for me tremendously is called brain spotting therapy. A trauma therapist that I was seeing was trained in this specifically, and I found the therapy extremely helpful. Your brain processes things for up to 72 hours afterwards, and if like say, for the way that Caleb died was by a gun. And so one thing that I would do is through the brain spotting is I would just think of a gun, and I would think of what it looks like, and I would think of the noise that it makes, and I would think of the word, and I would think of everything about it for as long as I needed to just process that one thing. EMDR is like you're processing things over and over, and you're like reliving the entire thing over and over again until the feelings kind of get smaller. But with brain spotting, it's just one thing at a time. And so I found it doable. I mean, of course, it was very hard and difficult to do, but extremely helpful. And so I say, the things that I brain spotted are still hurtful to me, but I see them kind of through a blurry window now instead of clear as day. It's not as stinging as it was before the therapy. So if you have a trauma therapist who is trained in brain spotting, I highly recommend it.
Yep. And anything we're going to mention to you, sweet parents, would never replace, like Christy just said, potential therapy or counseling. I do want to just mention, we have a little resource called Survivors of Suicide, and it's put out by the American Association of Suicidology, which I never knew there was such a thing. But to validate all of us on this panel and all of you all watching that feel like you have PTSD following this, the American Psychiatric Association ranks the trauma of losing a loved one to suicide as, quote, catastrophic. And they say it's on par with that of a concentration camp experience. So if you feel like the trauma you've experienced is dramatic, it's because it is. And I want to validate those of you that are feeling like you have PTSD or you've been through something traumatic. I'm validating that for you because we all have been.
I'm glad you said that too about a counselor. Now, two people have mentioned it, and we'll keep going here because this is such an important topic. But somebody in the chat box was saying they've been hunting for a counselor. I want to encourage you to not give up hope. I know that sometimes you have to go through several before you find somebody who you can really connect with. But so many parents have had so much help through counseling, and also through grief counselors and through trauma therapists. Christy talked about brain spotting. We have had a lot of parents say that EMDR was helpful. There are a lot of different things people have mentioned that are helpful, but we really encourage everyone tonight, if you feel that's something that would be helpful, if you're struggling, keep trying. If you can find somebody that you like, keep trying, or reach out to us, and we'd love to help you try to find someone. So anybody else want to comment on trauma and PTSD?
Yeah.
Say real
Go ahead.
Go ahead, Josh.
I was just going to say PTSD manifests itself in different ways too, and the Hollywood sort of version isn't necessarily what we experienced, or I'll say for myself anyway, experienced. It's for me, it wasn't necessarily like I was shocked and like hiding in fear and like a sensory overload. In fact, for me, it's sort of the opposite, is just a sensory nullness, and or sometimes just like not being able to think through things. I couldn't create. I couldn't, like, creativity was gone. I would not be able to remember words, and not be able to string words into a full sentence properly, which is not, sort of how this is always visualized on screen or portrayed to people. So PTSD may not be what you think it is, and may not look the way it is, and things that you're having trouble with may actually be sort of your PTSD symptoms. Again, I'm not a counselor, but that is definitely something a counselor would say to look into. That some of the things that you experience and go through may actually be symptoms of PTSD that are, still lingering. And honestly, I'm finding, this is, 3 years later, and I'm finding as you can see right now, a increase in some of my symptoms, specifically finding words, specific word. I've always been a wordsmith, and I've always wanted the right word for the right situations. So it is extremely frustrating me when I can't find that one word that I'm looking for, and I have to find an alternative. But yeah, that's something that is a PTSD response, honestly.
And also, if there's anyone out there like me that before you experienced the loss of your child to suicide, you were already dealing with trauma, whether it was for me, it was chronic illness from Lyme disease and childhood neglect. I found that I needed something more than the traditional EMDR and grief counseling. And I found something that worked really, really well. It is called trauma-informed stabilization treatment. And you can find it, I found it by searching online. There's actually a therapist search button. You can search in your state for someone that's trained in this if you're finding yourself complex trauma. And just remember the name Janina Fisher, and her website has a therapist search for complex trauma counselors.
I was going to add too that I felt very what I had discovered my child, and so I thought I would never ever recover from the trauma. And I remember in reading in Grief Share, I went through Grief Share with Gary and Laura, and I remember thinking there's no way that I can ever heal from this. There's just no way. And I spent a long time, years, thinking there's just no way. And I just thought that once you had PTSD, that you were just, like it was a sentence for life. And just reading and finding out that you can heal from it. It doesn't, I don't feel like I had PTSD. I don't feel like it was a disorder that kept me from functioning, but I felt like I just had post-traumatic stress. And so I guess the hope is that, if you are feeling, obviously you are feeling that you've been through trauma, it doesn't, as Christy kind of explained, it doesn't sting the way that it always did. I was even at home when ours happened. And so like I said, I just did not think there was ever a way that I could ever heal from it. And I'm in the healing process. Are there still moments? Yes. My husband also did EMDR. He came on scene very soon afterwards, and really did a lot of the actual, just the hard work. And so he has done a lot of EMDR, and he's still 4 years later, when he goes into those moments, he can picture the EMDR lights and he can pull himself out of it. So it for certain people, and I know it's, so EMDR doesn't work for everybody, but it is something that can help. So there is hope.
So Susan, I love what she read, and in the follow-up email to this webinar, there is a link to that booklet. We'll put a link to that booklet and to some other resources. But so I guess the bottom line is all of us know that we have been through a catastrophic, was the word that Susan read there, event. And everybody's brain sees it differently and responds differently. And so all of us have different things that have been helpful, but counseling or therapies or, whatever it is, there is hope. You will not always be like it is right at this moment. And all of us would agree with that. We all remember that first year and second year. We remember these times. And a lot of the people that registered to be here tonight are very, very new to this journey. And so I love what Susan said there, and everyone said that this is normal. This is part of it. Incredible trauma. First of all, we didn't expect our kids to go to heaven before us, but we certainly didn't expect our kids to go to heaven by suicide. That was absolutely, somebody said, not on the radar. And that's true. It was not. Even if you had an inkling that could happen, it's still not something you thought really would happen. So thank you guys for lots of great conversation on that.
The Our Hearts Are Home ministry to bereaved parents is solely funded by generous supporters like you.
To partner with us to reach grieving parents with the hope found in Christ, visit ourheartsarehome.org.